Kelsey Mitchell has always been the kind of player who doesn't just show up to play basketball, she shows up to make a statement. Her energy, her competitive fire, her grit. They've all defined the Indiana Fever long before the national cameras started following every pass and every glance between her and Caitlin Clark. And for years, Kelsey has been that quiet storm, the beating heart of a team that's weathered rebuilds, tough losses and shifting expectations. But now, the arrival of one of the biggest stars in all of women's basketball has rewritten everything. Caitlin Clark isn't just another draft pick or another piece of the puzzle. She's a cultural movement, a phenomenon who brought an entire new wave of attention, pressure, and scrutiny to a franchise that wasn't ready for this level of spotlight. And for Kelsey Mitchell, that spotlight is both a blessing and a test. Recently, she sat down with WNBA legend Sue Bird on her podcast Bird's Eye View, and for the first time, Kelsey spoke honestly about what it's really been like to share the court, the locker room, and the identity of this team with Caitlin Clark. The tone of the conversation wasn't defensive, but it was raw. When Sue asked what it's like playing alongside Caitlin and how that dynamic has shifted the Fever's chemistry, Kelsey didn't sugarcoat anything. She admitted that social media narratives and external noise have all twisted what's happening inside the locker room into something it isn't. She said people tend to overlook her leadership, not because she's invisible, but because in today's sports world, stories move faster than truth. Everyone wants a rivalry, everyone wants a hierarchy, and somewhere in that hunger for headlines, the real story gets lost. The one about two competitors learning how to coexist, grow, and win under pressure. Kelsey spoke about adjustment, a word that hung heavy in her voice. She said that when someone like Caitlin Clark walks into your organization, there's no such thing as business as usual. Everything changes. The way practice feels, the way the media behaves, even how the front office communicates. She said there were growing pains, not just for her, but for everyone from the Pacers' entertainment staff to the Fever's front office, all trying to find balance in a brand new world that revolved around one player. But instead of resentment, Kelsey showed something rare: understanding. She described Caitlin as someone who, despite the fame and the flashing cameras, never acted like she was above the team. She wasn't trying to be bigger than the program, Kelsey said. And in a world where ego often drives headlines, that one line hit differently. She said Caitlin was humble, confident, yes, but rooted. She didn't walk into that locker room expecting anyone to bow down or change who they were. She just wanted to fit in, to contribute, and to win. That humility, Kelsey said, was what made her respect Caitlin the most. The conversation moved deeper. Sue Bird noted that it sounded like Caitlin was that same way in the locker room, giving her best, bringing light to everyone around her. Kelsey agreed instantly. She described Caitlin as a kid in a candy store, a player whose love for the game radiates whether she's dropping triple-doubles or sidelined with an injury. She said what made Caitlin special wasn't just her talent, but her consistency, that even when she wasn't on the court, her passion didn't fade. Most players, when things don't go their way, when their bodies give out, or when the spotlight dims, pull back. But Caitlin poured in even more. She cheered, supported, and stayed invested. That's what earned Kelsey's respect. It wasn't just about stats or highlights. It was about attitude. But let's be real, the Indiana Fever are living in a pressure cooker. When Caitlin Clark joined the team, it wasn't just about basketball anymore. It became about expectations, ratings, ticket sales, and national conversations. And while that kind of visibility can build a franchise, it can also divide it. When Coach Stephanie White made headlines by saying Kelsey Mitchell was our #1 priority last summer and she's our #1 priority this summer, she might have meant it as praise. But the reaction was explosive. Fans immediately felt the tension. Because whether fair or not, words like that create a narrative, one where Kelsey and Caitlin are seen as rivals instead of partners. Instead of celebrating two elite guards working together to transform a team, people started picking sides. Was this Kelsey's team or Caitlin's? Who gets the final shot? Who's the face of the franchise? And the saddest part is that none of that division came from the players themselves. It came from outside, from media soundbites, misinterpreted quotes, and fans reacting to narratives rather than truth. Kelsey's perspective on that chaos was mature. She said social media has become a weapon, twisting simple statements into battles and reducing human relationships into hashtags. She said the locker room doesn't live by those same storylines. Inside, there's respect. There's competition, sure, but also admiration. She said that Caitlin's style actually complements hers, that they both love the game the same way, they just express it differently. Kelsey is fire, explosive, driven, attacking. Caitlin is flair, calculated, creative, visionary. Together, when the chemistry clicks, they create something electric. We saw that version of them during the Fever's post-Olympic break run, a stretch of basketball so fluid it looked choreographed. Kelsey was averaging over 20 points, Caitlin nearly matching her while dishing out double-digit assists and flirting with triple-doubles. The team was lighting up scoreboards, hitting 100 points, playing with pace, confidence, and joy. For a moment, it felt like the Indiana Fever were the future of the WNBA, a young, hungry, fearless team powered by two women who played the game the right way. But that magic didn't last. Somewhere along the line, the energy shifted. Maybe it was the weight of expectations. Maybe it was the constant scrutiny, every possession dissected, every play turned into debate fodder. Maybe it was coaching decisions that disrupted the rhythm. Whatever it was, the balance got thrown off. What once felt like harmony began to feel like hierarchy. The offense slowed, the confidence dipped, and suddenly, the Fever didn't look like the same team that had the league buzzing a few weeks earlier. And here's where things get complicated. Caitlin Clark isn't the type of player who demands the spotlight. She's not arrogant, not overbearing. She's competitive, yes, fiercely so, but she's also respectful. She's someone who understands the importance of team culture and chemistry. That's why this friction doesn't make sense when you really look at it. It's not about ego. It's about structure. The truth is, the Fever are trying to build an identity in the middle of chaos. Caitlin Clark is the face of women's basketball right now, like it or not. Her name brings cameras, sponsorships, and headlines. But she's also a rookie, learning how to navigate the pros, learning when to speak up and when to listen, learning how to lead without stepping on toes. Kelsey Mitchell, on the other hand, has been through the grind. She's seen losing seasons, rebuilding years, and roster turnovers. She's earned her voice. She's been the constant when everything else changed. So when Coach White draws those lines, intentionally or not, it places these two women in positions they never asked for. One trying to live up to impossible expectations, the other trying not to get lost in the shadow of them. Kelsey's honesty in that interview wasn't shade. It was perspective. She was reminding people that leadership isn't always loud. That being a star doesn't mean you have to dominate every moment. That chemistry isn't instant. It's built through time, trust, and mutual respect. She acknowledged the challenges, the awkward adjustments, and the silent tension that can creep in when everything suddenly revolves around one person. But she also gave Caitlin credit, genuine, heartfelt credit, for handling it all with grace. Kelsey said she respected how Caitlin never let her passion waver, even when things weren't going perfectly, even when the weight of the world seemed to sit on her shoulders. And that's what makes this story so fascinating. You've got two alpha competitors, two elite scorers, two leaders in their own right, trying to coexist in a system that hasn't quite figured out how to let them both shine. One is the established veteran who's been through every trial imaginable. The other is the generational rookie whose arrival changed the league overnight. And in the middle stands a coach trying to manage egos, expectations, and narratives that are bigger than basketball. It's a storm of ambition and identity, and it's shaping the future of the Indiana Fever in real time. But if there's one thing that stands out in Kelsey's words, it's her respect for the game itself. She talked about how she, Caitlin, and Aaliyah Boston all share the same deep, almost childlike love for basketball. They approach it differently, sure. Kelsey through raw scoring and emotion, Caitlin through vision and precision, Aaliyah through power and poise. But that love connects them. And that's why there's still hope for this duo. The chemistry isn't broken and it's evolving. The outside world might be trying to turn them into rivals, but inside that locker room, it's still about the work. About figuring out how to make two great players elevate each other instead of compete for attention. Still, the reality is clear. It's time for Caitlin Clark to take the wheel. Not because she's better, but because that's what the Fever drafted her to do. The organization, the fan base, the entire WNBA ecosystem has built her up as the leader of Kelsey Mitchell had nothing but genuine respect and admiration for Caitlin Clark. Not in the kind of shallow, media-trained way that players sometimes do, but in a way that showed she truly understood what Caitlin brought to the game, what she meant to the team, and how her presence elevated everyone around her. There was no resentment in her tone, no ego hidden between her words, just appreciation for the kind of energy, discipline, and fire Caitlin brought with her every single day. And that's why so many people still believe this duo can absolutely work. They've already shown flashes of greatness together, moments on the court that felt electric, like the perfect blend of talent and timing, two players whose games were meant to coexist. The way Caitlin commands the floor with her vision and passing, combined with Kelsey's speed, aggression, and ability to score from anywhere, makes for a backcourt that should terrify defenses across the league. They've proven they can share the floor, share the spotlight, and still dominate. But as the season unfolds, the real problem doesn't seem to be the chemistry between the two players. It's the leadership above them that seems to be creating unnecessary division. The elephant in the room is the way Stephanie White, the head coach, has been handling this dynamic. It feels like she's trying to rewrite the natural pecking order, trying to build this team's identity around Kelsey Mitchell when, let's be honest, that's not the current reality. The moment Caitlin Clark arrived in Indiana, everything changed. The fan base, the media attention, the expectations, the very culture of the franchise. She didn't just join a team, she elevated it. She brought the national spotlight, the sold-out arenas, the record-breaking viewership, and the kind of attention the Fever hadn't seen in years. That's not arrogance, that's just the truth of what Caitlin Clark represents for women's basketball. And when you have a generational player like that, a coach has to adapt, not resist. You can't pretend that the impact she brings off the court and on the court are separate things. They're intertwined, and when harnessed properly, they can be the foundation of a dynasty. What made the Caitlin-Kelsey partnership so beautiful at first was its balance. Caitlin's playmaking and shooting created opportunities, while Kelsey's athleticism and aggressiveness filled every gap perfectly. They didn't need one to dim so the other could shine. They needed a system that let both burn bright at the same time. But that kind of harmony takes trust and vision from leadership, and that's where the cracks started to form. When a coach begins sending mixed messages, talking about one player being the priority while the other is the clear public face of the franchise, it creates confusion, not just in the locker room but among the fans. Fans start to take sides, and the media starts building narratives about ego clashes that don't even exist between the players themselves. Instead of celebrating one of the most dynamic duos women's basketball has ever seen, people are being forced to choose who the team belongs to, as if unity and success can't coexist. That's not on Kelsey, and it's certainly not on Caitlin. It's on leadership that refuses to embrace what's right in front of them. Stephanie White has to realize that great coaching isn't about forcing hierarchy. It's about managing talent and chemistry in a way that brings out the best in everyone. Trying to define whose team it is only divides the locker room further. This generation of players doesn't need a coach who plays favorites. They need one who empowers collaboration, who recognizes that having two stars isn't a problem, it's a blessing. And the Fever have that blessing right now. If White continues to feed into this either-or narrative, she's not just risking tension between two elite athletes. She's risking the momentum of the entire franchise. The fan base that has rallied behind this team because of the excitement Caitlin and Kelsey bring together will eventually turn on the management that keeps them apart. Caitlin Clark's arrival was supposed to be the start of a new era, not the start of a power struggle. The Fever were on the verge of something special, a fresh identity built around teamwork, excitement, and the kind of basketball that reminds people why they fell in love with the game in the first place. But for that vision to become reality, leadership has to evolve. You can't coach like it's the old guard anymore, pretending that hierarchy is more important than chemistry. Caitlin and Kelsey have already shown what's possible when they play freely, without the weight of politics and public perception dragging them down. They've shown that two leaders can coexist. Two alphas can thrive together when they trust one another and when their coach trusts them. At the end of the day, this isn't about whose team it is, it's about winning. It's about doing what works and letting the results speak louder than any coach's narrative. Caitlin Clark is not just a player. She's a movement, a once-in-a-generation talent who changes everything she touches. Kelsey Mitchell is a veteran warrior who's paid her dues, carried the franchise when no one else would, and earned every ounce of respect she's getting. Together, they could redefine what the Fever mean to basketball fans everywhere. But that future depends on leadership's ability to step back and let these women lead from within, not from behind clipboards and talking points. The truth is simple. You can't have two stars if you refuse to let them shine together. You can't build chemistry in a culture of competition where unity should exist. This duo has the potential to become legendary, but not if they're constantly being framed as opponents within their own team. Stephanie White needs to stop drawing lines in the sand and start building bridges before she loses not just her players, but the trust of a fan base that has finally started to believe again. If she doesn't, the Fever could find themselves right back where they started, full of potential but lost in internal chaos. There's no denying what's possible here. The Fever have lightning in a bottle with Caitlin Clark and Kelsey Mitchell, and they're at a crossroads that could define the next decade of the franchise. Will they choose ego and hierarchy, or will they choose chemistry and shared greatness? Because if they make the right choice, if they embrace balance instead of division, the Fever won't just be contenders, they'll be champions. And that's what everyone wants to see. Two players pushing each other to new heights, not because one has to lead over the other, but because together, they make each other better. So, can Caitlin Clark and Kelsey Mitchell truly thrive together? Absolutely, if the people in charge get out of their way. But if this coaching staff keeps treating it like a tug of war instead of a partnership, they're not just standing in the way of progress. They're standing in the way of something historic. Something historic. And that's the part people don't talk about enough. The human side of this story, the quiet moments behind the scenes where chemistry is either built or broken, where leadership either empowers or divides. Because when you think about what's really happening in Indiana, it's not just about plays or stats, it's about identity. Kelsey Mitchell has been the heart of this team for years, carrying the load through losing seasons, putting in the work when no one was watching, giving fans a reason to keep showing up even when the headlines weren't kind. She earned her stripes, no doubt. But then comes Caitlin Clark, a phenom who shifts the entire gravitational pull of women's basketball, and suddenly the dynamic changes overnight. It's not Kelsey's fault, and it's not Caitlin's fault. It's just what happens when a generational talent enters a small market team that's been searching for relevance for too long. The adjustment period was always going to be bumpy. You don't merge two stars without friction. The problem is when the friction isn't managed, it turns into fire. Inside that locker room, the energy has shifted. Players can feel it. The cameras are always there now. The expectation's heavier than ever, and every small mistake turns into a viral headline. Every whisper becomes a rumor. Every timeout argument becomes a talking point. That's pressure, and it's not something every coach knows how to handle. Stephanie White, for all her experience, is walking a thin line between control and chaos. She wants to be the voice of reason, but in trying to control the narrative, she's losing sight of what makes great teams great. Freedom. Freedom to play, freedom to grow, freedom to lead without permission. Caitlin thrives when she's trusted, when the system bends to her natural instincts and allows her creativity to shape the game. Kelsey thrives when she's unleashed, when she can use her explosiveness without worrying about politics. Together, that should be unstoppable. But when leadership tightens the leash, you suffocate the very spark that makes both players special. Fans can see it too. You look at the crowd during home games, the signs, the jerseys, the emotion. It's not just about basketball anymore. It's about connection. People are emotionally invested in this team because they see potential. They see two women who could rewrite what leadership looks like in sports. But when they hear mixed messages from the top, it confuses them. One week, it's Caitlin's the face of the franchise. The next, it's Kelsey's our priority. And fans are left asking why it has to be one or the other. Why can't it be both? Why can't Indiana build something revolutionary? A team that doesn't revolve around one superstar, but thrives because two can coexist without ego. That's the vision the Fever are missing right now. They're too focused on managing perception instead of nurturing chemistry. Even off the court, the divide is noticeable. The media gravitates toward Caitlin naturally. She's the story, the headline, the click. But within the team, that spotlight can feel blinding. Some players handle it gracefully, others quietly retreat. Kelsey's comments on Sue Bird's podcast weren't about jealousy. They were about navigating that shift, trying to stay true to herself in an environment that suddenly changed. Her honesty was refreshing, and her respect for Caitlin was clear. But she also hinted at the adjustment period everyone's been forced to endure. The front office, the training staff, the players, even Pacers Entertainment, who now have to manage the Fever like a national brand instead of a small franchise. When she talked about roles needing to be situated, that wasn't just about on-court positions, it was about power dynamics, about understanding who's leading and who's supporting, about knowing where everyone fits in a story that's suddenly bigger than basketball. And that's where leadership becomes make or break. Great coaches adapt, insecure ones double down. Right now, Stephanie White feels caught in between. On one hand, she wants to protect her veteran core, Kelsey, Aaliyah, Nalisa, those who've been through the trenches. On the other, she has to elevate Caitlin, because that's what the league, the fans, and frankly, the entire business side of basketball demands. The trick is balancing those forces without alienating either side. But instead of balancing, she's dividing. Every time she emphasizes one player over the other, she plants another seed of doubt. Every time she frames Kelsey as the leader and Caitlin as the rising star, she's unintentionally feeding the narrative that they can't coexist. And that narrative becomes poison, seeping into press conferences, social media, and even locker room conversations. The truth is, Caitlin Clark doesn't want to take over the team. She wants to elevate it. That's what makes her special. Her leadership isn't loud. It's magnetic. Her presence alone raises everyone's standards. She shows up early, she studies film like a veteran, she takes responsibility even when she doesn't have to. That's not arrogance, that's accountability. And that's the kind of leadership that wins championships. But when you pair that with a coach who doesn't fully trust her yet, you get hesitation instead of harmony. You get moments where Caitlin defers too much, where the offense feels stuck between two philosophies, where no one knows who's really in charge of the tempo. That hesitation kills momentum. It's not that the players don't trust each other, it's that they don't know which version of themselves the system actually wants. If the Fever want to move forward, they have to make a choice, not between Kelsey and Caitlin, but between fear and freedom. Do they want to play small, holding on to old hierarchies and keeping veterans comfortable? Or do they want to evolve, build around shared leadership, and trust that greatness doesn't have to be singular? Because history shows that when two stars align, they don't cancel each other out. They create galaxies. Look at what's happening in women's basketball right now. Record attendance, booming TV numbers, more eyes on the sport than ever before. Indiana has the chance to be at the center of that movement, but they can't do it by clinging to outdated structures. They need to embrace the new era, the era of collaboration over control. And if that means letting Caitlin Clark take the reins a little more, so be it. Not because Kelsey Mitchell isn't deserving, but because Caitlin's leadership naturally opens doors for everyone. She draws the attention, she absorbs the pressure, she creates space, literally and metaphorically, for her teammates to thrive. And when Kelsey feeds off that, when she's allowed to play freely alongside Caitlin, you see something special. Two players dancing in sync, two energies blending into one unstoppable rhythm. That's the version of the Fever fans fell in love with after the Olympic break. That's the version that made people believe they could be more than just a young rebuilding team. They could be contenders. But potential without direction is wasted. If Stephanie White can't step back and see the bigger picture, someone else will have to. Because the window is open right now. The chemistry between Caitlin and Kelsey isn't broken. It's waiting to be reignited. They've proven they can respect each other, play off one another, and win together. All they need is a system that celebrates that instead of suffocating it. If leadership keeps forcing this team into categories, who's the leader, who's the star, who's the future, they'll lose sight of the present. And the present right now is golden. The Fever don't just have talent. They have history in the making. The question is, will they recognize it before it slips away? Because if they can find that balance, if they can embrace unity over division, Caitlin Clark and Kelsey Mitchell won't just survive this season, they'll define an era. They'll remind everyone that greatness isn't about ownership or hierarchy. It's about trust, chemistry, and the willingness to build something bigger than yourself. And that's what this story should have been from the beginning. Not a tale of conflict, but of coexistence, of two stars proving that shining together is far more powerful than shining alone. More powerful than shining alone.